Hi, everybody. This is Lee, and I'm talking about the concept of racial oppression and its link to economic oppression, and why there is also a link between racial justice and economic justice. That people are trying very hard to use a form of propaganda to gaslight African Americans specifically into remaining silent about the both racial oppression and then economic oppression that they experience, saying that economic oppression is far more important. And that we apparently should remain silent. And I just don't agree with that. And that there is historical precedent for what we're seeing today, that it goes all the way back to the days of slavery, which was itself a capitalistic system. It was a capitalistic system of economic oppression and subjugation that was justified through the use of racial attitudes, and that people benefited from it, that there were people who were victims of it, and that there were beneficiaries of that system, and that slavery, by another name, still exists today. It was called Jim Crow, and then now it's called the war on drugs. But let's start with this economic system of slavery. The Origin of Racial Oppression in Anglo-America. It was written by Theodore W. Allen, and he does a great job of just laying it on the line of how slavery was not inspired by racism. It was actually greed. It was inspired by greed. Again, economic injustice. He says that in the span of a single lifetime, after the 1780s, the South grew from a narrow coastal strip of worn out plantations to a sub-continental empire, and that entrepreneurial slavers moved more than 1 million enslaved people by force from the communities of the slave trade from Africa into the South and the Western United States to vast territories that were seized by force from Native American inhabitants, and that from 1783 up to at the end of the American Revolution up to 1861, the number of slaves in the United States increased 5 times over, and that due to this expansion, North America became a powerful nation, that this country was built actually upon the expansion of slavery. And that for white enslavers, they were able to force enslaved African American migrants to pick cotton faster and more efficiently than free people. And that this practice rapidly transformed the southern states into a dominant force in the global cotton market. And cotton was king. It was the world's most widely traded commodity at that time, and that it was the key raw material during the first century of the Industrial Revolution. That was what slavery did. It moved North America from an outpost, a colony of people living on worn out plantations, into a nation at the forefront of the Industrial Revolution. That slavery did that. And that the returns from cotton, this monopoly that the South had, it powered the modernization of the rest of the American economy. And by the time of the Civil War, the United States had become the second nation to undergo large-scale industrialization, and that in fact slavery's expansion shaped every crucial aspect of the economy and politics of the new nation, not only increasing in power and size, but eventually dividing North American political system, differentiating regions, and then helping to make the Civil War possible. And so slavery is what powered this nation economically. It drove it, brought it from just random outposts of people living on the edge into an industrialized society. And so people made fortunes on the back of slavery, on the back of free labor, and in the South and in the North as well, that there was profiteering, and there was a feeding upon of these African Americans, their subjugation economically, and then justified with racial attitudes. And so we see that even after the Civil War, the Emancipation Proclamation, that slavery continued by another name, Jim Crow, and that it was the criminal justice system that was used to re-enslave and then convict lease out laborers to capture and then lease convict laborers that under the 13th Amendment that they were still slaves. And so that continued for at least another 100 years into the middle of the 20th century. And then following the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement, acts of defiance against this racial system of economic oppression, that the war on drugs was launched to serve similar purpose and target African Americans for incarceration, and then again under the 13th Amendment, slavery. And so again, slavery is a capitalistic system. It's an economic system. It's a very unjust system. And so any act against it is actually a form of economic justice. Social justice, definitely economic justice. And so the gaslighting and propaganda that happened in order to justify slavery was also used to justify Jim Crow, slavery by another name. And that is also being used to justify the war on drugs. Slavery by yet another name, the criminalization of these communities, all the way from the targeting of the youth, the breadwinners in the family, the tearing apart of communities, the separation, the psychological trauma, and the torture, the for-profit bail system, which creates debt and also drains funds from these communities, and then also the for-profit prison system, which also drains funds from these communities. And then the fact that after having received these marks on their record, time away from the job market, there's marginalization from jobs, from opportunities, again, a form of economic repression. And so, for those who keep saying, this is this, it is a form of propaganda that's being used to inform people that criminal justice reform is not a form of economic justice, and that's just not true. The criminal justice system is a system of economic repression that's being used to target various communities, and for the most part, African American communities, and drain resources from those communities. Civil asset forfeiture, for-profit bail system, the building and operation of these prisons themselves, the draining of tax dollars into these systems, and then also the marginalization of these communities affected by the system from economic opportunities following incarceration. It's a form of economic justice. And so I would say be very cautious of people who are telling you things like this, because what they are actually doing is telling you about themselves, their own attitudes and how they feel, and the fact that they are justifying a system that economically oppresses certain groups and trying to dismiss that. It tells you what you need to know about that person. Good luck.